I'm a operating theatre nurse at Frimley Park Hospital. But it's a career late in life for me. At the age of 50, I trained to be a nurse after a 35 years career as a professional musician with military bands, pop groups in the 70s, boats, the shows, the summer shows, all that sort of stuff. But I retrained at the age of 50 to be a nurse, and I specialise in urology now, working in the operating theatre. And about 3-4 years ago, I realised my dream. I've always wanted to write a musical. There is a big crossover. A lot of people who play in amateur theatre, when they can get it, do paid work. You know, there is a crossover, because some of the amateur musicians are very, very good, but the full-time musicians are just that little bit better. But there isn't a lot of work for musicians now. I know some fabulous players who are working in Tesco's and McDonald's because the work's not about, and they're the guys who are prepared to help us out when we're doing things like this to raise money for a charity. Professional music is all about performing the things that you don't necessarily like performing. If you've been booked for a country western gig and it's not your thing, you play country and western music. If you're booked for an orchestral gig, you play according to what's demanded of you. Whereas, of course, in the amateur field, you can choose. Oh, that sounds interesting, and follow your own personal dream. But in the professional world, I'm sure with acting, singing, everything, if it's work, you do as you're told. The other big difference, of course, is that if you, in the professional world, if you let yourself down, there are 100 people waiting to take your slot, waiting to take second violin in the orchestra. If you turn up late, if you're sick too often. Whereas, of course, in amateur world, if you're prepared to volunteer, it's much freer but more enjoyable because of that. Right. But the standard of musicianship isn't a lot different, to be honest with you. There are several here who are good enough to be professionals, and they do it just because they love it. But this is amateur theatre, and if someone comes every week and he pays his money, irrespective of how much talent they've got, there has to be a place for him. There has to be a few lines for them. There has to be a place in the chorus for them, because this is what they do. You know, they pay their £25 show fee, and they're the first one there at rehearsal and the first one to buy a T-shirt, and you find the part for them. Obviously, in professional theatre, that wouldn't happen. But at the other end of the scale, some of the better ones, especially men, there are 10 ladies to every man, and the joke goes that the ladies have to be gorgeous to be able to sing, dance, act. Men need a pulse, and it is a little bit like that. And some of the better men feel that something better comes along, they go, well, no, I'm off to somewhere else now. And whereas the ladies wouldn't do that, and the ladies are just a little bit more conscientious because of that, because there is such a demand for the better men in amateur theatre. This is actually the prequel to Stand By Your Beds. The young nurse who was the lead in Stand By Your Beds. This is her last year at school, but really it's about her little brother, who's a first year from a council estate. He's joined a posh school because he's won a scholarship, and he doesn't fit in because he's the rough kid from the council estate, and these are all posh kids. Both of them, in some ways, are on the same subject. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. The health service was the first show, and I see so many of my colleagues where there's so few nurses left on the coalface. There are hundreds of them pushing bits of paper and playing with a computer and doing their clinical governance lectures, and the poor old nurse on the front line might have only been qualified for 6 months with one care assistant struggling with 16 patients. And so Stand By Your Beds was all about a 1950s hospital run by a matron, and then all of the administration paper shuffling was sent to that hospital, and they watch it be sort of buried and under this bureaucracy. And this is the same sort of thing, but it's about teaching this time instead of nursing. But we could have done Stand By Your Truncheon. We could have done the same thing with the police. We could have done exactly the same thing with several, established. I can't think of the right word. Institutions. Yeah. Where there are so much health and safety legislations and things that people are struggling to be able to do the job. And it's and that's basically what it was. But of course, that sounds boring. So there's a love story and there's comedy and there's all the other things that make it an interesting story. But I was just trying to say, and both the shows have this at the end as a parody of the Martin Luther King speech, where they said, "I have a dream that one day, basically politicians will leave us alone to get on with nursing. Basically, they'll leave us alone to get on with teaching and won't interfere, and we can do what we love." Because this is what we like to do. And really, that's what the two shows are about. Robert comes up with this great line. He said in the end of Stand By Your Beds, where they go, "And one day there'll be more beds than managers." And it got a huge cheer from the audience, who were mainly nurses. And some of them were managers, and they cheered as well, because that's really what the show is about. It only seems like couple of times a week rehearsals, but the commitment is massive that these people do. They actually pay for the privilege of doing this, and it's massive. And for the production team, it really is. People like Mike has been the stage manager, has been building props and making things for me for the last 4 months. I've loved music all my life. They could not sit me still. If they hadn't given me a musical instrument, I used to play the upside down biscuit tins, and my mum got so sick she sent me to piano lessons just to keep me. And I joined as soon as I left school. I joined a band as a French horn player. The first chance I got, I bought a guitar and then toured around with a rock and roll band. Music is my love. But I've always wanted to be musical director. I love conducting, and I wanted to be musical director of a local operatic society. Didn't realise all that. I'm fairly late in life to it. I've been doing it for about 10 years, I suppose, but I just loved it. Well, there's the obvious difficulties because our children. They're not children anymore; they're in their 30s. But the directors have been doing this for years and years, as and your children go through it. And my son is a very good actor, and he took the lead part in Stand By Your Beds. But of course, there's the people. Oh, he only got that because he's Paul's son. He didn't. He got it because he was the best person for the job. But that is a little bit difficult. The cry of nepotism. But it really doesn't happen with this society. But it is difficult. You feel this is people's hobby. They've given up a lot of time, their lives for it. And the ones who aren't quite so talented, it's as important for them to have a meaningful, challenging part. What this is a great leveller. We have people within this cast who are the wife of a brigadier, who would normally be go-to, and they are working alongside people who work in Tesco's, and there are some very wealthy, well-to-do people in their own jobs who are extremely important people working alongside as total equals to I say the lady who works once a week in the corner shop. It's a huge social event. I mean, most of these people, if you imagine worst case scenario at a funeral, all of their friends would be their fellow OPSOC members. It's a real social event, and they have become. A lot of these guys have known each other 30, 40 years, and they are their closest friends. And this is what they do together. This is what they love to do. And really, we're, as the production team, we're the outsiders. We're the ones that come just enable them to do what they love to do. We've had an extension built upstairs so that I can have now my own room, and the piano and everything's in there. But we can't park the car in the garage because it's always full of props that I'm making. I've got 3 sheds now full of props for stand by your beds or behind the bike sheds, or the bench in there for making the next set of props. Her wardrobe has got half of her clothes in it and half of costumes for various shows. So she puts up with an awful lot, I'm afraid, for this. But I think she enjoys it.